Hi friend, and welcome back to Against the Grain. This is part 2 of our 3-part series designed to help you truly be able to understand how to make that journey to transitioning to a gluten-free lifestyle. Now remember, lifestyle is a process. We don't expect you to be hard on yourself and set these high standards to think you gotta go cold turkey and do it all at once. It's a process. Just like we're taking you through video by video, I want to give you bite-sized amounts of information to really reduce any stress or overwhelm, because what research shows is that when we can do a little each day, think turtle power if you will, just a little action each day consistently, well, it pays off with large dividends, and that applies to your health and healing also, especially when it comes to talking gluten. So let's take a look at where we're at right now. First, we're going to do a quick recap, okay? So as you just finished video 1, what you should have taken away from that is gluten is a protein. It's a tough protein at that, really hard for our bodies to break down, most commonly found in wheat, barley, and rye, with heavy cross-contamination in oats. Our bodies can't easily digest this protein, and we're consuming a lot of it, which is why the more and more it's been used and introduced in our food chain, the more and more problems that we're beginning to face that are widespread, resulting from the breakdown in our healthy gastrointestinal system. So, we use it in a ton of things because it's cheap. We've genetically modified it to keep up with supply and demand of a growing population. It's a glue-like binding substance that's easily added into many products, many foods, many fake foods as a filler. And again, it gives texture, it gives palatability, it gives us a false sense of an experience that our brain and our mouth will like, so that we want to eat more and more and more. And as a result of this overconsumption, of this genetic modification, well, what we're seeing is that close to 75 million people are suffering with gluten problems. And again, I'm not sure where you're at on the spectrum, from mild, moderate to severe to autoimmune, so you should never touch it again. But what you need to know is not everybody has a gluten sensitivity, but would everybody be better off not eating gluten? You bet your bottom dollar is what I wanted to say with it, but you better believe it. That's absolutely the truth. So again, let's understand more about what's really going on once we begin to ingest it, because what we're seeing more and more is that modern convenience, all of our fast food, our convenience food, it's costing us our health, and it's literally set to bankrupt our country. So I know that eating gluten is convenient. I know that it's highly processed in a way that they put lots of additives and chemicals in it, so it makes your brain feel happy when you're eating it. But the reality is, if you stay down this path, you're leveraging your health, your vitality, your quality of life for a bag of chips or crackers. So what's more important? Again, no judgment, just asking you questions, because you're the steward of your own health. You get to take back control, you get to make those choices, and that's what this educational series is really all about, empowering you with the information so you can make the choices that are right for you. Now, let's understand some of the effects. Again, we talked a little bit about this in video 1, but how's gluten showing up in your body? And you may not have put 2 and 2 together that what you're eating is creating more of these chronic problems, from migraines and canker sores and chronic fatigue to GI distress and malaise and hair loss, depression, bone and joint pain, easily bruising, edema, skin rashes, and so much more. So what's the cost of gluten to you? Is it keeping you feeling so uncomfortable in your body that it's literally impacting your relationships, how you interact with yourself and others? What's the real cost? Well, I don't know what's happening externally, but I can tell you what's happening internally. What we know is that I'm going to take a moment and tell you a little bit about your gastrointestinal system. Okay, so it's a closed system. It's a tube from one end to the other. And what this tube-like system is designed to do is to absorb, to assimilate, and then to eliminate. So it assimilates the necessary nutrients. Again, if you remember back to nutrition class, the nutrition video series, nutrients are essential for every function in your body. You can't do the things you do without them. Where do nutrients come from? From the foods that we eat. So that kind of goes back to that saying, you are what you eat. And even more importantly, you are what you absorb. So now we've got to look at this closed tubular system that's there to first and foremost absorb key nutrients so your body has the fuel to do what it needs to do, from think and breathe and move and create new cells and create babies and fight off sickness and disease, you name it, build new health, strong bones. It's amazing, let alone what it has to deal with the stress coming in every day and your response to when you're sitting in traffic and you're running late. All of those actions require nutrients. So there are what are called villi, and if you look at this slide right here, these little kind of finger-like things are they're villi that literally grab the food, and those are what begin to help to absorb in the nutrients. So there's some different things that happen to the system. First of all, again, it's there to absorb. So now we're eating a lot of gluten, and gluten is this glue-like substance. So I want you to think about that for a minute. It's glue. What do you think that's doing to your intestines? Are you dealing with any kind of constipation or irregular bowel movements? Gluten could be at the root cause. So you see gluten coming in, and there are other things that can impact your gut lining, the permeability, because again, it's supposed to be a closed system. Nothing gets in or gets out. And you can see that there are what are called tight junctions. So these membranes all sit closely together, and they are a very tight sealed system. Now, there is an escape route. Heaven forbid that there's crisis in the system. There is something that can open these gates and flood them open very quickly to get the bad stuff out and seal it back up again. Well, here's what happens. Gluten, because it's hard to break down, requires the release of, and so it's floating around in there, it's not breaking down, the body's trying to figure out what's going on, and so it's sitting there. It's literally putrefying or rotting in our gut. Think about what's in your garbage can, okay? That's what's happening in your gut. So now we have undigested food particles, and right now we're going to just speak specifically to gluten. And as a result, we have an increase of microorganisms, toxins. So think about what's happening in your garbage can. It begins to be a perfect breeding ground for bad bugs, bacteria, fungus, yeast, candida, things that are good in balance, but when we have a sick environment, we now have an overgrowth of the bad. And the thing about this gastrointestinal system is that 70 to 80%, different literature says different things, but we'll go with the low side, 70% of your immune system lives inside of this gastrointestinal system, these tight junctures, okay? So now, when this stuff's coming in, we're getting a lot of it. It's breaking down. Several things happen. The glue gets stuck in the villi. So level one is it's taking a long time to break down. We're getting overgrowth of bad bugs. And now, because the villi are starting to stick together, they're being worn down, they can't grab the nutrients and absorb. So we begin to have malabsorption, which is pretty severe. It can cause a host of so many chronic diseases, hormonal imbalances, and accelerated aging and breakdown and fatigue. It literally will break down your system if you're not getting those key nutrients in. Another big thing that happens when we're not absorbing nutrients, because the glue from gluten is literally sticking in the villi, is that the body perceives that it's not getting food. So what it does is it slows down your metabolic function, literally, to conserve what you do have. And it will immediately turn everything that comes in into fat. Because fat is that usable form of energy. It's stored energy, okay? So if you're having a really difficult time losing weight, if you notice that you're having more and more belly fat growing, increasing, it could be due to gluten and malabsorption in your system. So over time, we're eating more and more of this, our convenient lifestyle, we're going through drive-through, we're grabbing whatever is easy and on sale on the end caps at the grocery store, we're having the grocery store do our cooking for us, and yet on the inside, it's a slow, destructive process to this gastrointestinal system. And what begins to happen, this is now over on this side of the slide, a phenomenon called leaky gut or intestinal permeability begins to occur. These junctions become loose and inflamed, and it happens a few ways. The first way is that chemical zonulin is triggered to flush out because gluten's not supposed to be in there. They can't break it down. It's hanging around. The body realizes this is bad, so your immune system immediately goes on alert and says this is bad, bad, bad. So it flushes this out, literally just gets it right out of here, and it puts it into the bloodstream. The moment that this is in the bloodstream, and you can see all this stuff in here, the body says, whoa, 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 this isn't supposed to be here. This is not normal. And so it immediately talks again to our immune system. And so the B and the T cells are released. So we're having more of an immune response because there's something called a cytokine. It's a type of protein that communicates with the two sides of your immune system. The cytokine essentially says, hey, we've noticed that something bad is in the bloodstream that shouldn't be here. These undigested gluten food particles. Now this can happen with other food sensitivities too. So if you've gotten your food sensitivity result, this also pertains to other foods that you're now having what you'll see in IgG response to. That means they've been leaking through, because as this is breaking down from gluten, from microorganisms, from toxins, from stress, the longer this breaks down, not only does gluten get through here, but other food properties and proteins do as well, which is why you now will find that you're having multiple food sensitivities in addition to gluten. And so they're leaky, they're inflamed, things are getting out. The cytokines begin to say, hey, we got bad guys here. The cytokines are inflammatory little proteins. So they actually increase inflammation in your body. So now again, we've got nutrient malabsorption. This is what leads to autoimmunity, because as these little guys circulate throughout your bloodstream, well, they also now they're circulating, and as they go to different areas, there's cases of mistaken identity. Autoimmunity is where body is attacking self. It mistakes self as non-self. Also, what the research has shown is that gluten has some very similar protein structures as to key tissues in your body, like the thyroid and the pancreas, even some of the connective tissue. So when we think about autoimmune diseases like fibromyalgia and type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, gluten is really central to it. So if you've got an autoimmune condition, even if you don't think you have a gluten problem, get rid of it, because it's going to increase your autoimmune response. It's going to keep your immune system in an overdrive or very hyper responsive situation. In autoimmune, we want to balance back out that immune system. We want to heal it. So gluten is a big part of that. I know I've spent a long time on this slide, but there's so much here that I really want to try to impart to you, because this isn't just a fad. This is a variety of ways that gluten begins to break down the lining of your stomach. And as this happens over time, it gets so depressed. Think about when you've been really just plugging away at something over and over and over. It's taken a lot of energy, a lot of energy, a lot of energy. At first, it meant a lot. You had so much to give, and you went, and you went, and you went. But if you're fighting day in and day out and day in and day out, you can't keep going at the same rate and the same intensity. And at some point, you're going to get tired. You're going to get worn down. You may even just give up. And all of a sudden, the bad stuff's just running over you and taking over your life and your world. Well, that's what's happening in your gut. And that's what's happening with gluten. So gluten is keeping your body fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. So just like we talked about in the stress reduction classes, it's about identifying the causes of stress, gluten being a big one, to your body, so that you can identify, reduce, and remove, okay? So again, really what's happening is this whole response puts your immune system on overdrive. It's releasing those cytokines, those inflammatory communicators, and so now you are in a state of chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation increases your risk of chronic disease, especially heart disease and stroke, okay? So it's pretty serious stuff. It's not just about losing a few pounds or doing what Gwyneth Paltrow is doing, whether you like her or not, okay? So let's take a closer look. So now that you've got an idea of some of the physiological processes that are occurring within your body, hopefully you can have an appreciation for how the inflammation is now occurring, why you're having a difficult time losing the weight, why you're feeling so fatigued. As you're beginning to understand that, now let's go a little deeper into understanding where gluten is really hiding. Because remember in video 1, I said, hey, it's in a lot of places, and places that you probably wouldn't even guess. So let's begin to dive in. It hides in places like malt flavoring. Some of the stuff is food related, and you're going to have to turn over those labels and begin to look and read. It's going to be hidden most commonly in soups, commercial bouillon and broths, cold cuts, French fries, because they're often dusted with flour before they're actually bagged up and put in the freezer section. Processed cheese, mayonnaise, ketchup, malt vinegars, soy, and teriyaki sauces. Salad dressing, again, seasoning packets, imitation crab meat, bacon, egg substitutes. You're going to need to look. If it is in fact certified gluten-free, it'll say it on the label. If not, you got to turn it over and look. Tabbouleh, I literally just had this situation happen a few days ago with a friend of mine that was eating tabbouleh, who had just recently gone gluten-free, and then after eating it the next day had all of her symptoms back tenfold because we didn't look at she didn't look at the label, right? Didn't know. She didn't realize that what was in there was a gluten-based grain. So tabbouleh, she had shared that with me after the fact. Sausage, non-dairy creamer, fried veggies, anything fried is breaded. It's been put in flour. It's been put in a batter that contains gluten. Gravies, marinades, a lot of canned foods, canned and baked beans, cereals, commercially prepared chocolate, breaded foods, there it is again. Fruit, fillings, and puddings. So remember, binding, right? It binds. So think about fake foods like chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets are not a real food, but that gluten binds them together. Even a lot of tortillas have gluten in it to bind it together as it rolls it out to still give it some good chewiness. Hot dogs, ice cream, root beer. Now here are some of the other places that we get a little deeper. Energy bars, trail mix, syrups, wheatgrass. A lot of instant drinks, you want to look at those labels. Flavored coffees and teas, vodka, wine coolers, meatballs, communion wafers, veggie burgers, roasted nuts, beers, oats, oat bran, unless certified gluten-free. But here's the other big area. It's in household products, shampoos and cosmetics, lipsticks, lip balms, Play-Doh, medications, non-self-adhesive stamps and envelopes, and even vitamins and supplements. Now, on that note, I can tell you with confidence, we use only nutraceuticals, which are basically, they're a pharmaceutical grade supplement, meaning they go through all quality control standards. What you get at the grocery store, it's the wild, wild west. There's no actual standardization, there's no testing, so they can put things on the label and they don't have to be tested to ensure that what's on the label is actually in the product. Nutraceuticals, and why they're sometimes more expensive, they're clinical grade, so you're going to get the purest and the highest amount of ingredients that are actually going to make a clinical change in your body, okay? But also, they go through good manufacturing practices, which means no gluten, no dairy, no soy, no cross-contamination. They're not made or processed in plants where wheat products are. And they do go through the certification, the good manufacturing practices, where they have to, every batch gets tested. So what they say is in there gets tested to ensure that it is in there or is not in there, right? So there are some differences, and it's important to look at your labels and to understand what you're using, where your risks are in your everyday life, because again, we want to begin to identify, to be aware, so that you can begin to reduce your exposure. So if there are things that you're interfacing with several times a day every day, can you begin to interface with them only one time a day every day? And then from one time a day every day, can you go to every few days? Can you go to once a week? Can you go to once a month? Can you completely cut it out? Then can we look for replacements? Can we begin to find better options that are gluten-free? So that's the type of steps, that's what I want you thinking about. That's the type of journey that we're going to be continuing to take together. So now a word on labels, because you may or may not be used to reading labels. If you haven't been, you're going to have to as you begin to make this gluten-free journey, because I'm not just talking about how much protein and saturated and unsaturated fat is in something. I'm talking about what are the ingredients, what's actually making up this product. So label reading 101. Ingredients are listed from the most to the least. So whatever is in the top is what you're going to have the most of in the product. And again, as you get further down, that's what there is the least amount of. So the first place you want to look it's not a gluten-free oat. It doesn't say it's a certified gluten-free product. So you're seeing whole grain oats. You're seeing soluble wheat. So remember, wheat, rye, barley, oats, okay? So those are the big obvious words. If you're seeing those words, you're like, oh gosh, that's got gluten. Now, the less obvious, and where I told you it often hides, is malt. So right here, you've got malt flavoring, and malt is a derivative of barley. So I know this can get confusing. That's why I'm sharing it with you. I have simplified. There's a couple of great downloadable PDFs that are going with this class, shopping lists, and a big gluten-free guide. So it'll really, the more you are exposed to it, the more you hear it, the more you look at the labels, the quicker it becomes just to pick it up, and it won't seem so overwhelming or scary, I promise. That's why we're taking this time together. Now, another area, oftentimes, again, if the product does not say gluten-free, where you see natural flavor, could absolutely be a hidden area of gluten. And last but not least, you want to look at what other types of ingredients it says it contains and or the plant it's processed in. So you will see that little kind of an addendum below, contains wheat and soy, contains dairy, eggs, and wheat. You'll see things like that. Contains peanuts and wheat, okay? You'll also see things like processed in plants with plants with wheat and dairy. So those are the kind of things you want to keep your eye out for. Whole grain wheat this is another label. I just wanted to give you an idea. So you'll see again, whole grain wheat. That's got it in there, so we know it's gluten. And this one actually says down on the allergy statement, contains wheat. So you will see that often under the allergy statement. It really points out in kind of bigger letters, hey, this has wheat in it, or hey, this has dairy in it. So that's what I want you to begin to become comfortable with, because as we wrap up session 2, video 2 of our 3-part series, what your homework assignment is let's go back one, is to begin to check your labels. So all I want you to do, the foods in your pantry, the foods in your refrigerator, just pull them out and begin to turn the box over and look. And now, literally, if you want, go get a pen and begin to circle, what foods do I have that have gluten in it? Just see if you can begin to find them. So I want you to become a gluten detective, so you can see, go even into like your cupboards where you've got your spices and stuff, pull them out, look at the back of labels, and just begin to identify anything that says wheat, anything that says oat, anything that says barley or malt or rye. I want you to go ahead and begin to circle. So that's your homework for today. Go take action right now. Next up is video 3, so get ready, because that's when we're going to put your full plan in place so you can truly have all the resources that you need to really live that gluten-free life and optimize your health and well-being. I'm Dr. Melissa. Until next time, stay amazing.